Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's now the noon hour in Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm just going to give us a couple more minutes as people are still filing in. We'll probably start in about 2 minutes. This is 6 points of failure for reimbursement, infusion reimbursement from Prochant. So 2 more minutes and we'll get started. Thank you so much for your patience. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, I want to thank you for being here with us. I know how valuable your time is. We only have 30 minutes for this webinar, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is 6 points of failure for reimbursement for infusion pharmacies, a new webinar from us here at Prochant. I want to welcome Tina Ratliff with me as well and talk for a second about just who we are. My name's John Love. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Prochant. Many of you probably know me from some of my former gigs where I was COO of Rockpond Solutions and then head of sales for WellSky's home care division. For about a decade or so, I have been in infusion and specialty pharmacy, traveled the whole country, talking to really hundreds of pharmacists and hundreds of pharmacies about everything from efficiency and the pharmacy business, and especially around reimbursement. And I want to welcome Tina Ratliff. Tina is our pharmacy reimbursement manager. She comes to us with over 25 years of pharmacy experience. And Tina has done everything from the provider side to the software side, as well as opening up her own reimbursement. So Tina, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
So what we're going to cover today. So we're really going to cover what we kind of see as the 6 points of failure. So let me pause for a moment and talk about what some of you may have in your mind where, hey, I've been in infusion for a long time, John. There's 1,000 points of failure, and that's true. There's really 1,000 things that could go wrong, but we certainly don't have the time, and you wouldn't want to sit through that presentation. What we found in our experience of speaking with pharmacies, whether that be really big enterprise pharmacies all the way down to kind of our mom and pop, we're just trying to cover our patients in our local area, is that there are really 6 places where reimbursement breaks down. And we want to cover those. They start with incorrect and missing intake information, then missing forms. And then we go just to billing errors. We're going to review some of those. And then we go into contractual noncompliance, like contracts set up, and then lack of collection documentation, and then just simply bad collection follow-up. So those are what we're going to cover. And again, with only 25 minutes, we're just going to jump right in. I do want to invite you to ask questions. We'll answer those as they come in. You can type them straight in, and we'll answer them as they come in. And so, Tina, are you ready?
Yeah.
Great. So, Tina, I view reimbursement a little bit like a house. And when I think of intake, I think of a foundation of a house. And no matter what we do, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. We talk to a lot of folks who are trying to paint their house or put on a new roof, but their foundation is bad and it's not improving the house. So when you think around just poor coordination of benefits, or maybe not verifying your patients that they meet, coverage criteria, or maybe even just the inaccurate payer or incorrect ID numbers and incomplete information, Walk us through what you're seeing every day as you're out there talking to pharmacists.
So one of the things is, knowing what kind of information to gather. So, needing things like medical records that support the need for the drug therapy. Making sure that your Medicare patient isn't under a Medicare HMO that you may not be contracted with. Typos are a big thing with your ID numbers or dates of birth. That can be a huge issue. That has to, a lot of data could have to go back and be corrected. Things like that. So, a lot of that is just sometimes not knowing the right questions to ask, maybe when you're verifying benefits. The insurances aren't always going to tell you things unless you ask them the specific questions. So, yeah, it's definitely can cause a lot of trouble on the back end.
Right. And so, in fact, Tina and myself were just on a call with a pharmacy that said, hey, our entire billing operation is in poor shape. And turns out they weren't. What was happening was their back end, their billing and collection team, was spending all of their time making up for the mistakes in their intake. And because of that, everything got older and everything got harder to collect, obviously, because they were spending all their time. So when you think of unsigned delivery tickets, Medicare requires a signature, no prior approval or having authorization on the incorrect item, or just poorly verified benefits. In any site that you want to just kind of talk about for a second around those?
Yeah, so a lot of times we like to use these websites. They're great, these payer websites, and they give us different benefit categories. It's really hard to get infusion-specific benefits from there. You can get DME and physicians outpatient and X-ray and everything else under the sun, but there are some very specific questions that you may want to ask, and it's important that you're collecting all that proper data, verifying that the coordination of benefits is correct. The primary is really the primary, and the secondary is really the secondary. Items like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if your intake isn't there is a moment where you just have to have a moment to look in the mirror and ask, hey, is our intake causing everything, what I call a chain, and I'll keep talking about this, there's a chain of dysfunction in reimbursement, and that just keeps happening, and early on in the chain creates more dysfunction as we go. So now we're going to talk about missing forms. And so, when you think about your AOB, your assignment of benefits, when you think of your lack of documentation for claims processing, do we have an updated RX order on file, our DME information, medical records to support the need? Walk us through these 5 and just what you're seeing every day and what you would highlight needs to be major focuses for pharmacies.
So, of course, assignment of benefits, especially now with Part D and supplies sometimes being paid by the patient, that can chasing down the AOB can be kind of a pain, especially if you're using couriers and shipping services, and you have to mail these documents out to patients and have to follow up on those. But, not having your signed AOB can hold up your ability to bill your patient. Lack of documentation for claims processing, like, maybe a payer is, really bad about denying your first claim because there's no medical records. Getting that first claim into them with medical records. Having your diff form completed. Sometimes that kind of falls through the cracks because since diff forms are completed by the provider staff, they can sometimes fall through the cracks. So making sure you have those and attached to your claim.
So let's talk for a second about just how diligent a pharmacy has to be with missing forms, because, these things are transferring, transitioning around an organization. What do you see as far as those cracks? Tina, did we lose you?
Just making sure that you're following up on those documents, that you have everything, you get everything as much as possible that you can get during the intake process, because once you get to the point of billing, a lot of times some time has gone by, and it's a lot easier to grab things like medical records and forms and anything you might need from the patient or doctor at the time that you're giving them the service. It's a lot easier to get it than to go back later.
Yeah, a pharmacy is just going to have to be really diligent around missing forms. There's no haphazard way to do that. We're going to keep going and talk a little bit about just what we all know that are billing issues. So, when you think about, the common ones we're seeing around is incorrectly coded items, improperly calculated billing units. Maybe the modifiers were added incorrectly. I'm going to let you kind of step in here and talk about some of these and what you're seeing every day when we go out and talk to pharmacists.
Yeah, so a lot of this too can happen with system setup. So if your system has the ability to hold the code and maybe even the billing units at the inventory level, for each of your drug items. Sometimes the people who are putting those items in, they're not billers. They're more going to be your clinical staff. And sometimes, they may code it, they might put your billing units in, but not really understand billing units. And I've seen oftentimes where people are billing and they're being paid less than they really should, only to realize later that, hey, that medication has way more billing units. It wasn't by milligrams. It was actually by, a certain number of milligrams. And, they're going to get underpaid.
So you spent years, and I'm going to lean on you on this one. You spent years as, the reimbursement trainer for the largest infusion software company in the country. How often do you see when improperly set up billing systems?
A lot. There is just so much that some of these software billing systems will do that kind of take the guesswork out of billing. For example, you might be able to designate in there at a payer level, what is billable and what's not. How much am I going to get paid for this? Is auth required? Is a specific document required? If all of that is set up and maintained, not just set up but maintained, then that can take a lot of the guesswork and create a lot of automation for you.
Yeah, I think maintain is a really good word there. We often talk about, if you remember the game you played as a kid, telephone, and you would set up and there'd be 10 kids and somebody would say something about the end, it was completely different. That's what a pharmacy system often looks like over 5 years, because someone came in and started doing a different process and a different process. And eventually, when someone like us comes in and we look at what the original intent is and what it is now, we just have a whole lot of opinionated diversions that have happened. And so it ends up being a game of telephone. And I think I would recommend, and certainly Tina, I think would, is that all the pharmacies, and we have a ton of pharmacies on the line, you should be asking yourself, hey, have we gotten away? Where have we really bastardized our process and our systems to where we're now in a labor-intensive risk area where human beings have to be perfect, where the system was set up to do that for us. So I think that's a great place to land there. Now let's talk about contract management. Okay, contract management is our fourth point here, and I just want to continue to invite you to ask questions as you go, and we'll answer them, and we can answer them at the end as well. When you think about contract management, obviously that's a part of every infusion pharmacy. And so not having contracts in place or execution details clearly communicated, that's going to be devastating to everything. And so, when you look at your contracts and how they're loaded in the software, correctly, Tina, I'm going to kind of come back to you in your time as a national trainer. I mean, what do you see when contracts, as they're loaded in these systems, what are you seeing the major mistakes that are happening?
Well, sometimes they can be quite tedious in some of these systems. So, a lot of times what will happen is they're not in there and and it's going to take some time to get them in there. So people will create little spreadsheets and cheat sheets, and they'll, type in this on the claim and type in the price, and, do a lot of manual keying, which, with that comes error. Instead of taking that time to load those things so that, everything can be streamlined. But the thing is that I see the most is people will have good intent and they'll put their contracts in their system and be super excited about it, and it'll be working great. But then when that new fee schedule comes out the next quarter, now a lot of those prices can be incorrect. So now you're booking incorrect revenue. And, hopefully someone's going out there. I know that some providers will send them to you automatically, but some payers are requiring you to go and get them from them. So, and then you have to load them. And so that's another kind of tedious job. And, if you have a large pharmacy, contract management could be a full-time job. Just making sure all that stuff's loaded, keeping it consistently tweaked. It can be a lot of work, but it's worth it in the long run, because what you're putting into it, you're getting out tenfold with your billers being able to streamline their processes and a lot less human error.
Okay, we've got our first question. What softwares do you work with? So we currently work with CPR Plus, CareTen, Brightree, and Universal. And so at Prochant, those are our 4 softwares that we work with and that we have expertise on. We probably have over 20 to 25 years experience on all of those softwares. And so a second question that came in is, does Prochant do audits? Are you available to do an audit? We are. And so, and we'll talk about that a little more at the end, but we're happy. One of the things we want to do is be able to come in and offer, free audits to our pharmacies, just to ask yourself, hey, how are we doing? What's our standard? How are we doing? So we're going to keep moving, keep asking questions if you can. And so on to number 4, poor documentation. This one's really interesting to me, Tina. And here's where obviously we have incomplete appeals documentation, but I'd like to sit down, at something as specific as failing to image appeals packets. So, maybe you could walk through what really happens in a pharmacy when we have a failure to image appeals packets, and how we keep talking about that chain of dysfunction, how we lose time and effort around that.
Yeah, so it seems like such a small thing, but it can make such a big impact. So as an example, if someone was to send in an appeal, pull all this documentation, send it in, they've not scanned what they've sent into the system, the next person who might be your next layer of collection person, or maybe their work gets shifted to someone else, to them it's going to look like either A, they had a good intentions to send one but didn't, or if they find out from the payer they did receive it, they are going to then not know what they sent. So they're going to probably be capturing all the same data that was sent the first time and sent back in again, just basically duplicating what was already done and getting probably the same response. So that can cause a lot of issues, and also just understanding the denial and knowing if an appeal is necessary. Can I just correct this claim and send it in, or can I just make a phone call on it? Sometimes people are quick to jump on sending an appeal when it really wasn't necessary, and it wasted how many ever minutes or an hour even from their day.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing on poor documentation here is just, as I look at it as an executive and a leader, I'm looking at that and saying, there's a hidden cost. Obviously, there's a cost of bad reimbursement. The cost is, hey, we only got 90% of our cash to net revenue in. So there's 5 to 7% of that money that didn't come to us, therefore we don't have it. That's a cost. Maybe our DSO is 65 or 70. That's a cost. It's taking longer and I have money. But there's also a hidden cost. Every time John Doe or Jane Doe spends 2 or 3 hours doing something because of poor documentation and communication, and redoing something that didn't need to be redone, that's a cost to your organization, but it's hidden. And hidden costs are the worst ones. Hidden costs grow. They grow in bad cultures. And so if you're not watching this and making sure that people are getting trained well and that the same problems aren't happening over and over again, what you do is you're sitting on a little bit of a time bomb here where we're collecting more and more of this invisible time. And so what happens next? You get a knock on your door and someone says, I need more people. And so you go out and you do, as a great employer and leader, you go out and you hire someone else in order to help your people because they need more people. But what if they don't need more people? What if the process is broken? That's where we have to start, because we all know the most expensive thing we have are our people, and we love our people. But at the same time, we don't want to hire more people that are unnecessary. That's the place where we lose lots and lots of our margin. Hey, Tina, I have a question for you that got sent in. How do you, and this is going to be a great one, Tina, how do you suggest training a team that's a little set in their ways and been around a long time?
Oh, those are my favorite. Well, one of the things, and sometimes this isn't plausible, but sometimes it is I've had people who are really stuck on paper. And, when you go from printing and AR and you have a collector that's always done it that way, and she likes to have that touch and feel that AR and write on that paper, it's really hard sometimes to, get people into a different process and have them, let's say, work straight out of the computer. I start out by letting them have that little comfort zone of going, okay, you can have your paper, but let's do all the work here. And then once you see, because I think a lot of it with them is trust. They trust their process because they've been using it, and it's working. It's not the most efficient, but it's working, and it's a comfort zone. So making them feel comfortable in the new process is the number one thing to getting people in that mindset to be a little more open to change.
That's a great answer, making them feel comfortable. Let's keep going to our last point of failure, which is lacking collection follow-up. So we see collection follow-up being poor in attention to detail on denials or EOBs, lack of pressure on high dollar aging receivables, or not following through on a claim that wasn't 100% collected and it remains unsolved. So Tina, I'm just going to ask this question, and I'll be a little bold with it. When you think about some of these, and particularly on the lack of pressure on high dollar aging receivables or not getting 100% paid and the lack of follow through there, how much of this is really a problem of expertise and experience? Just a pharmacy not having the expertise and the experience to accomplish this high level reimbursement?
Yeah, so with collections, I know that, it can be time consuming. One of the things, when I first started, I remember when I very first started doing a job as a collector, I had to call back a couple of times to the payer on claims, and because I didn't get the call reference number, or I didn't get the previous claim number, or they told me something and I believed them at what they said. And then I'd talk to my, mentor person, collector, who's been there a while, and they'd say, well, did you tell them this? Oh, no. So, and then I have to call back. So, there is a lot of knowing what to ask, knowing what to believe, and making sure that every single thing is documented in the notes. Knowing where your focus is. Some people, I've gone and sat with collectors and I said, well, how do you know to work this first? And they said, I just, usually work, this person's account, on this day. And I'm like, well, what about, these larger accounts? How about, when do you work these? And so.
Or the ones that are aging.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And they come up with their own flow. And sometimes the problem is different people in your organization that perform the same job function can all come up with their own flow. And so now you've got all of these different processes happening, and it's just really hard to maintain that. So yeah, a lot of it, is I didn't know how to do it really. So I kind of just started doing it this way and have always done it that way. No, there's a lot of that.
I agree. I think, I continue to hear that there is a lack of expertise and experience at the highest level of collection. And I just want to say something, and just kind of how we feel at Prochant. That's your money, and you deserve it. And your reimbursement doesn't work for the payer; they work for you. And I think there's a mindset to that, which is the pay. Well, they said, well, I'm not really concerned with what they said. They don't want to pay you. That's their job. Our job is to get paid. And so that mindset has to really be inside of a collections agency in order to go out and fight for what is yours. That is yours. And so I do think that I'm going to ask kind of a bold question next. What does success look like in your pharmacy? Last 5 minutes, and I want to thank everybody. Got tons of pharmacies on for keeping with me. Stay with me the last 5 minutes. What does that look like? Because I just talked about the lack of expertise and experience. Okay, so let's say that we start to plug these holes. Let's say that we go out here and we get the expertise that we need, or we find it. What does that look like? It looks like a reduced bad debt to 3% or less. It looks like a cash to net revenue of 97%. It looks like a DSO of 50 days, but honestly, that's pretty high. We would think 30 to 40. And so I guess I'll ask the question, and silently, I just want everybody, every pharmacy on here, to ask yourself, is that what my infusion reimbursement looks like? And if not, why not? I don't know how many times in the past few months I've sat with someone who's conceded 85%. You don't have to have 85% cash. They're giving up 10 to 12% of their cash because they think that's just the course of doing business. It's not. Or, well, you just have to have a 60 DSO. You do not have to wait 2 months to get paid. You don't. You can get paid in a month or a month and a half. You can. You just simply have to think about it in a way of saying, what do we need to do to accomplish that? And so, I want to kind of finish up here on the last 2 minutes of just thanking you and tell you kind of what we do at Prochant. Prochant is the nation's largest and most successful HME reimbursement firm. For 20 years in HME, we have set the standard in reimbursement. So around 6 months ago, there was such a competing vertical between our HME companies and our infusion companies that the executive team and leadership decided to branch off into home infusion. And it's our goal to do the exact same thing in infusion we've done in HME. It's to set the standard. And so you can see my name there as well as my email. It's John L. Jon at Prochant, and Tina's there, Tina R. at Prochant. We want to speak to you. If you're not getting those results, we want to talk to you. We do that in several different ways. One, I'll just be very upfront. We're absolutely a full service billing organization. And again, we think we're the best in the country at it. And we are on a mission to let pharmacies get back to being pharmacies and get them out of the reimbursement business that drains them so much. But we're also a staff augmentation. If you find yourself in a place where you need an expert for 6 months or a year, we can provide that expertise. We're also consultancy. So if you need us to come in and look at it and do an audit, we'll do that. We really want to meet you where you are. There's several on-ramps to doing business with Prochant. Mostly what I want to do is just thank you for being here. I know how busy you are. We're in an incredible time, but I think that we can do incredible work in this time. I do want to end up with this. This is your money, and your reimbursement should work for you and not the payers. And so I do think that you can thrive in this environment, and we want to be there to help you. Thank you so much for being with us and spending 30 minutes of your lunch. And look forward to hearing from all of you as well as hearing from us very soon. Thank you. Have a great day.